Good evening, you're watching World News Tonight on TVP World. I'm Aaron Darman. From one Donald to another, the fallout from Donald Trump's inauguration continues as Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk tells EU lawmakers to listen to President Trump and step up defence spending. More on that in just a moment, but first, let's look at tonight's headlines. Struggles at home, but presenting a united front. Scholz and Macron meet in Paris. Could Poles be caught up in President Trump's mass deportations? And Poland takes a major step towards securing its natural gas supply. Europe is, was and will be great. That's the message Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk delivered to the European Parliament today as he unveiled Poland's priorities for its rotating presidency of the Council of the European Union. Top of mind was defence and energy security. And joining me now is our correspondent in Strasbourg, Kazimierz Słyszak. Good evening, Kazimierz. How was Donald Tusk's speech received by those in the room, and what exactly did he say?
Good evening, Aaron. Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk received several ovations during his fiery speech to the European Parliament here in Strasbourg. And in his speech, he focused a lot on defense spending. And let me tell you, the mood here in the European Parliament has shifted drastically compared to yesterday, when the MEPs discussed the future of the EU-US relations under the new Donald Trump administration. Yesterday, it was all about uncertainty. Today, they are talking about European unity, strength and greatness. But let's listen to the man himself, Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk.
Europe has no reason to feel inferior. Perhaps the most important words to be said here in the European Parliament should be directed at Europeans. Hold your heads up high.
Europe is, Europe was, and Europe will always be great.
The Polish leader went as far as paraphrasing the words of the late US President John F. Kennedy, saying, "Don't ask America how it can help our security, ask ourselves what we can do for our security." And that sentiment, more defense spending in Europe, is actually similar to what US President Donald Trump is saying, that Europe needs to take more responsibility. The Polish leader said here that Europe needs to start spending more on defense now before it's too late. And he said that this needs to be achieved as soon as possible, and it doesn't matter how. Let's listen.
I'll be honest, we shouldn't really care too much about what method we adopt to finance pan-European defense projects. There is no alternative to this. Europe must start defending itself, and so it must start spending European money on this as well.
I dzisiaj to Europa musi podjąć takie działania.
After the speech, Polish Minister for European Affairs Adam Szłapka repeated that this has been an awakening moment for the EU, and that it needs to take more responsibility. I asked him if other countries here in the EU will answer to the call of the Polish Prime Minister, how it was received. Let's listen to what he had to say.
We're expecting the white paper from the European Commission on appropriate ways of funding defense spending. So I'm optimistic about the future.
But apart from defense, there were also other priorities of the Polish presidency that Donald Tusk talked about here today in the European Parliament. One of those, a big one, is energy, energy security. He said that there can be no business as usual with Russia after the war in Ukraine is over. He also said that this energy reliance on Russia was one of the causes of the war in 2022, and also that the EU needs to lower energy prices. EU consumers, he said, are very hurt by the rising prices of energy, and that could be actually to the detriment of governments across Europe in the coming elections. He also focused a lot on Russian disinformation, tackling it, but also tackling illegal migration, border protection and health security, also taking a jab at the European Green Deal. The Polish Prime Minister said that he was one of the first leaders to say that this deal needed to be revised for the European farmers, and also said that one of the priorities for Poland will be health security in its presidency. The Polish leader was, like I said, very well received here in the European Parliament, but to give you more details on how exactly he was received, we will bring you here this report by my colleague Marek Steele.
This is what Donald Tusk received for his address in Strasbourg, which focused on European security, a standing ovation. His words, "If Europe is to survive, it needs to be armed," seem to have resonated among lawmakers gathered at the European Parliament.
Your Prime Minister told us and told Europe, stop losing confidence in ourselves. We are Europe, and we have to be proud to be European.
Let me first of all say how glad I am that we have a passionate European currently at the head of the presidency of the Council. I think it was a very strong speech of Prime Minister Tusk, and I think he made a very valid call. I mean, a lot of people have also said with the re-election of Trump, this is a wake-up call. To be honest, I don't think it's a wake-up call. I think it's the alarm going on after we've been pressing the snooze button for years and years.
With their own countries engulfed in internal political battles, MEPs from both Germany and France have been speaking especially highly of Tusk's leadership.
At this moment of weakness for Germany and France, the three personalities, Donald Tusk among the member state leaders, Ursula von der Leyen as Commission President, and Kaja Kallas as the High Representative for Foreign Policy, this is the crucial triangle.
Tusk faced some criticism from the European Parliament's right-wingers, including Poland's opposition.
Zero specifics, zero ideas, zero solutions. All these nice words you have spewed here are nowhere near reality.
He spoke beautifully today about the need for unity. And you want to see what the unity looks like in Poland? For his political rivals, he chose a Nuremberg. These are his exact words.
The overall response to the speech was much different, and that is not only because Tusk is part of the EU's mainstream, experts say.
He's really the voice of a changing Europe. And what I mean by changing Europe is a Europe that is facing struggles from many different areas. It not only has a conflict on its territory, it is struggling with its own competitiveness, it is struggling with internal divisions, domestic problems, with migration.
The EU's leaders are using the same language, experts indicate. In Davos on Tuesday, Ursula von der Leyen spoke in a similar manner about the union's security as she tried to convey to the new US administration that the EU is open to having a new relationship with the states.
We can do it the easy way or the hard way, and the easy way is always better. This from President Donald Trump as he calls for a peace deal between Russia and Ukraine. In a post on social media, he also threatened Russia with sanctions, tariffs and taxes if the war continues.
It's only going to get worse. If we don't make a deal, and soon, I have no other choice but to put high levels of taxes, tariffs and sanctions on anything being sold by Russia to the United States and various other participating countries. Let's get this war, which never would have started if I were president, over with. We can do it the easy way or the hard way, and the easy way is always better. It's time to make a deal. No more lives should be lost.
The EU's top diplomat says Europe is running out of time to invest in security as Russia pumps out weapons and armament. It's a warning reiterated by the EU's new defence commissioner, who says the continent should be prepared for an attack from Moscow in the next 5 years if Europe does nothing. EU correspondent Angela Scholz reports from Brussels.
The EU's foreign policy boss, Kaja Kallas, delivered a stark warning in Brussels today that if the continent doesn't get serious about defence, it will soon feel the might of Moscow as that country ramps up ammunition production and its imperialist appetite only grows. She made the warning at a conference hosted by the European Defence Agency and said that US President Donald Trump was right in his criticism that not enough allies of NATO have allocated funding for their defence portfolios. Here is what she had to say from Brussels.
The only language that Putin speaks is the language of strength. The EU has strength. Together, EU member states' economies are 17 times bigger than that of Russia's economy. We must force his hand to show him that he will lose and stop him before he attacks one of our own. People say I'm a Russia hawk. Well, I like to say that I'm a realist. For too long we have offered Russia alternatives, hoping that it would choose cooperation and economic prosperity for its people over fraudulent imperialistic ambitions.
This warning was echoed by the EU Defence Commissioner Andris Kubilius, who said that the appetite of Russian President Vladimir Putin may not end with Ukraine and support for Kyiv was paramount. Here is what he had to say.
NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte and EU member states' intelligence services are warning us. If we do nothing, in 5 years' time, Russia may be ready for a military confrontation with NATO and the European Union.
Next month, heads of state from across the EU will convene in Brussels for an informal summit where defence will be at the top of the agenda. Many here are also waiting with bated breath for the Defence Commissioner to hand down his white paper on defence spending. Now, the Commissioner has previously flagged that a big bang defence budget was required, and we'll wait and see what is in that policy document. My name is Angela Scoogens, and I'm reporting from Brussels for TVP World.
French President Emmanuel Macron has called for greater unity, ambition and independence for Europeans as he hosted German Chancellor Olaf Scholz in Paris. The two leaders proclaimed a united front in the face of looming US tariffs against the EU, despite their own political turmoil at home. Sasha Farbach has more.
Olaf, how are you? France and Germany are traditionally the motor of Europe, and the respective leaders are making efforts to show the world that the engine isn't broken, in particular to President Trump.
Do solemnly swear.
Just a few days into his second term, President Trump has already set out to slash the status quo, including by declaring 10% tariffs against China from February. Trump also has his sights on Canada and Mexico, and now the European Union could be next.
The European Union is very, very bad to us. We have a $350 billion deficit with the European Union. They treat us very, very badly, so they're going to be in for tariffs. It's the only way you're going to get back. It's the only way you're going to get fairness.
Although facing political crises at home, Berlin and Paris are still putting their best foot forward, prepared to counter the economic hazards that may hit the continent.
There is also an emergency to support critical sectors: automobile, steel, the chemical sector. There is an emergency to invest and reduce our dependence in key sectors: artificial intelligence, quantum science, biotech, energy, space, and of course, the European defense industry.
Despite Trump's aggressive threats, the EU and US share the largest bilateral trade investment relationship in the world, accounting for over $1.5 trillion in 2023, growing significantly since the last decade. But it is also energy that has played a crucial role recently. Since the start of the war in Ukraine, the US has become a major supplier of much-needed LNG to the continent, now accounting for around 50% of supplies. According to some experts, this may yet prove to be a tactic by Trump.
On the other hand, Donald Trump seems to want to sell energy to Europeans. So there is a space for sure for negotiation.
Of
As he made clear during the campaign and in his inaugural speech, Donald Trump is following through on his America First strategy. However, this may not achieve the result that President Trump desires and could backfire.
That it will be the foreign exporters that pay the price if America raises tariffs. Well, no, it's going to be American importers and American consumers that will pay the price. And this is just going to accelerate inflation.
Most EU member states' economies, like France and Germany, depend heavily on exports. As high energy costs remain a problem due to the war in Ukraine, and relations with China are uncertain, a new trade war with a traditional ally will yet be another tough challenge for European capitals in the coming months.
Will Polish citizens be deported from the US? That remains an open question as President Trump doubles down on his push for mass deportations. Sonia Agata-Bischan reports.
Is this the final goodbye for Polish citizens living in the US without legal status? Trump's first days in office, coupled with inaugural promises,
So help me God. We will begin the process of returning millions and millions of criminal aliens back to the places from which they came.
caused concern among Poles living in the US, prompting a response from the Polish Prime Minister.
I asked the Minister of Foreign Affairs to prepare our consulates, posts and services in the United States to be prepared for the possible consequences of these decisions in relation to Poles working and living in the United States with different status and level of legality.
The situation generated concern among some, others remained unflustered, pointing to the warm relationship between Poland and the US during the previous Trump administration.
We love Poland, we love the Polish people, and there's nobody better.
We should not really panic, and the media and even the Polish government are actually spreading panic, making it look like we're going to expect planes full of deported Polish citizens from the US to Poland. This will not happen.
Trump's deportation actions are likely to be focused on approximately 1.6 million illegal immigrants who had their final removal orders issued.
You can say it is a small group, considering there is around, different sources say that it's around 30 million people in the US that are illegally or out of status in the US.
I do agree that the ones that would or should fear first are the ones that already have final removal orders in place and the ones that do have convictions, criminal history as well.
That is not to say that what were considered previously favorable relations
Never had even a problem, not even a minor problem. We agree on so much, but we're behind Poland all the way.
would keep Poles entirely immune to deportation.
I do see Trump videos all over the social media saying how much he loves Polish people, but when it comes to enforcing rules, the rules going to be affecting people from all over the world the same way.
One of the initiatives coming from the new Trump administration indicates that enforcement of deportation could expand into areas like schools and churches that have historically not been touched by the federal government. Public institutions in Chicago, a city known for having the largest Polish and Polish-American population in the U.S., are bracing for that prospect.
Within the Chicago public school system, they've already announced that they are going to have a policy of non-cooperation with federal authorities because they want to encourage the students to come into school, and they're going to try to resist the ability of immigration authorities to come in and remove children, even though the Trump administration has said that they want to take aggressive action in schools.
Experts note that deporting all of the around 30 million illegal immigrants would cost billions of dollars and have major implications for the U.S. economy.
Poland has completed the expansion of its liquefied natural gas terminal. It now has the capacity to cover half of the country's demand for the resource and will even enable exports. John Kennedy has more.
Emerging from behind the thick winter fog is the newly constructed LNG tank, which, much like a combat vehicle, will provide Poland's energy security with an essential boost.
This investment is of strategic importance to the Polish government and Poland in general because it results in strengthening Poland's security and gas independence. We are self-sufficient in terms of gas supply. We do not need to rely on our eastern neighbors.
Located in Świnoujście, northwestern Poland, the LNG port's new tank will increase the annual regasification volume by almost 1/3. According to Sławomir Hinz, the CEO of Gaz System, the national gas pipeline operator, this will be enough to cover half of the country's demand.
This long-term process allows us to regasify 8.3 billion cubic meters of gas annually. These 8 billion cubic meters of gas can supply almost half of the Polish market.
Partly funded by the EU, the €400 million expansion also includes the construction of a second pier, which Deputy Infrastructure Minister Arkadiusz Marchewka says will be crucial in enhancing the region's energy security.
Thanks to the new transshipment pier, we will be able to reload this gas onto other ships, which will enhance the security not only of Poland, but of other Baltic Sea countries.
With sizable natural gas deliveries being pumped from Norway via the Baltic Pipe, and including the potential for a floating LNG terminal in the port of Gdańsk, it could lead to an oversupply on the Polish market, which analysts say could be sold on further.
That is creating a possibility of re-exporting LNG coming from US, Qatar, anywhere, through Poland to our neighbors, and by doing so, developing further gas market, which is totally independent from Russia.
Liquefied natural gas has played a crucial role in replacing Russian pipeline deliveries. Since 2016, the share of LNG in Poland's energy mix has risen from 8% to around 50% today.
As Donald Trump returns to the White House, the 47th President of the United States is planting the stars and stripes all over his plans for the future. So where does that leave Europe? From tariff threats to an immigration crackdown, the EU now needs to reckon with a strictly America First approach. And European leaders are already taking stock, including Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk. Here to break down what this all means for the region is Wojciech Przybylski, Editor-in-Chief at Visegrad Insight. Good evening.
Good evening. Thank you for having me.
So first of all, let's dig into Prime Minister Tusk's speech today, telling EU lawmakers, and I quote, "Don't ask what America can do for Europe's security, but ask what we can do." Has Europe been too reliant on the US?
Well, that's a question that states the obvious. Yes, it has, by design. And also, it knows it has. So European leaders have been struggling to limit that dependency and beat the partnership element. That comes only if Europe invests in its security on all domains, the military one, energy security, and technological sovereignty. So these actions are going to speak for Europe itself eventually, whether Europe also wants not to be so dependent on the US.
What do you make of Tusk's address today? Poland currently holds the rotating EU Council presidency. Is this him trying to put Poland at the centre of the region's response to Trump, effectively saying Poland will lead from the front?
Well, it's not as much a response to Trump. It is a calling to the hearts and minds of Europeans to take Europe seriously. Donald Tusk has been saying, and with much admiration and affection for the European project, European history, how great Europe is. And there is no need to make Europe great again. That might have been read as a bit of a sarcasm towards Elon Musk or Viktor Orban, all those guys who are trolling internet and the media for trying to steal the narrative. And the big narrative Donald Tusk is offering is about keeping calm, carrying on, and upgrading the critical domains like armaments, purchase, protection of borders, which he mentioned as a policy choice, and most importantly, getting energy policy right. I mean, speaking of energy policy, he actually developed quite a number of arguments for why this pragmatic policy focused on energy prices stability, reducing inflation, reducing the legislative burden that fuels inflation in this domain is the number one priority. And we should reckon with the fact that Europe has to do more, not just on the military security, but in energy security foremost.
How critical is that energy security and that discussion around energy security, especially given what we've seen with this sort of so-called hybrid war of Russia?
Well, it is critical because Europe's ambition is to be independent of the autocratic powers that supply Europe. We know we are dependent. We've been running on cheap American security, but we've been running also on cheap Russian gas, cheap Russian energy, and cheap Chinese labor. So in the trio, there is just one ally. It is the United States. There is no benefit from becoming dependent on autocratic powers like Russia or China is, but also in the domain of military security, Europe needs to do more. Energy-wise, Europe has been doing amazingly well, cutting the ties from Russia, cutting off the gas, oil supplies, replacing them immediately with American deliveries and other deliveries, but essentially also moving forward in the green transition to the next level of not being dependent on anyone globally that much to the extent that they are still today. So energy security is at the bottom of at the bedrock of security policy overall for all of our countries in Central Europe in particular. But they're also at the bedrock of the discussion about European competitiveness. Big part of investment that have been going away from Europe over the past 4 years of Joe Biden's administration have been going there also because of cheaper and stable energy prices. And until Europe sorts out energy prices and completes the transition, offering independent and reliable supply of energy, it won't be, again, competitive to the extent many other players globally are.
Now, we've also talked about defence. Prime Minister Tusk urged leaders to get on board with high levels of defence spending, up to 5% of GDP. That's something President Trump has also called for. Do you think this is Tusk sending a signal to Trump? Look, Europe hears you and will do what it can. Or is Tusk trying to put a positive spin on Trump's threats?
I think neither. Donald Tusk is saying to all other European leaders that it's a shame that Poland alone, together maybe with a number of countries in the Baltics, are paying for the rest of the European Union for their defense, for defending their borders. So Poland is spending 5% GDP, and countries like France or Germany are treating, if I paraphrase Mr. Macron, Poland as a supermarket for security, or Ukraine. So that's, this is about striking at the heart of the problem. This talk about how Poland is delivering security to the other partners in Europe. This is the really important inter-European problem and challenge. And that needs to be met with credible response, not because of Donald Trump. The problem was there the same under Joe Biden or whatever other president of the US there would be. It is our problem, and it's a problem that relates to the decomposition of our defense posture after the end of the Cold War. So the peace dividend we've been living off, and basically we've been reducing in many countries of Western Europe these levels of investment in our security, allowed expansion of economy, expansion of wealth, expansion of prosperity. But now, if we continue along that way, it will be a very difficult price to pay, because we'll pay with our freedoms, we will pay with our political independence, and with insecurity on our borders. So this is what Poland says to other European partners, not to Donald Trump. That's not really what the messages of Donald Tusk was about.
Wojciech Przybylski, Editor-in-Chief at Visegrad Insight. Thank you for your time. Always a pleasure.
Thank you.
And that's all for World News tonight. Do stay with us here on TVP World. I'm Aaron Darman. Good night.